Hey, this is JC and welcome to Small Brick City, where we want to help you build a Lego city regardless of the space you have, big or small. In this video, I'm going to show you why this small Lego city is better than a lot of larger Lego cities that you've seen. This is not a mini or tiny city as I've shown in other videos, but this is also not a big city. It's a small city layout that you might find in a small room, or it may represent a section of a much larger city. In any case, I think that this city layout that you see in front of you is better than a lot of larger sprawling cities that you might have seen. And I'm going to tell you why. It can be summed up in two words, and that is variety and density. This small Lego city measures 4.5 base plates wide by 2 base plates deep, so it's really not that big. However, it is rich in variety and density. Let's talk about the variety first. And the variety is displayed in 4 ways: the buildings, the road layout, vehicles, and minifigs. Let's start off with the buildings. There are many different buildings that make up the city block, such as expert modular buildings, which measure 32 by 32 studs. That's the downtown diner. It's an inset modular building. I'm using it as a corner build here, but this is a true corner modular, and that's the corner garage. I've also got half modular buildings, and this is 1/2 of the pet shop, or this is rather the pet shop, but 1/2 of the set. That's a 16 by 32 stud base plate, and I've got another half building over here. That's a townhouse mock. I've got 2 1/4 size modular buildings, what I call tiny modulars. They measure only 8 studs across and 32 studs deep. That's a bookstore and apartment. And over here in the corner we have the ice cream parlor, as well as the pastry school. I've also got a collection of different smaller buildings. These measure 8 studs by 8 studs each. That's a cluster of 3. And over here we have a cluster of 6 different buildings. Next to these buildings we have 2 odd-sized buildings. That's a coffee kiosk, and we have a sandwich shop right over here. There's also a collection of different food and market stalls you see throughout this little city. This really adds to the variety and the build of this city layout. Over here we've got a slightly larger pizza stand and an ice cream vendor. I've got one more building all the way in the other corner. This takes up a footprint of 16 by 32 studs, but this is a standalone building. It's in the form of an old church, but that really gives a lot of texture to the city. It is this variety of buildings of different sizes, heights, and looks that really add to the complexity and character of this small Lego city. Another element that adds to the variety of the city is roads. And I'm not just talking about roads for vehicles, because I know when you mention roads for Lego cities, most people think of road plates. But when I talk about roads, I'm talking about any kind of access path. These include roads for vehicles, small alleys, pedestrian-only roads, and even sidewalks. And we have this laid out throughout the city. Besides just having these roads, it's important to lay them out in an interesting fashion within the space you have for your city block. Just having one long road that loops around doesn't make it interesting, or having 2 roads that intersect can also be quite dull. What you want to do is create a variety of different paths and different types of roads to really add character and variety to your Lego city. This is an example of a road for vehicles in my city layout, and it's still quite a small road. It measures only 10 studs wide, but it's enough as a one-way street for vehicles, as you can see. And what I've done is just done a cross-section of a road, and you can see part of the road and you can see a turning here. And your mind will make up the rest. You can perceive that there's more of the town beyond this layout, but at least I get a road in. There's also a pedestrian-only road here, and that's where all these market stalls are. And it's at a T-junction, so it makes it quite interesting because you can turn left or you can turn right, which will lead you to these sidewalks over here. And here we are between the buildings. It's a bit darker, but that's because the really narrow path between the buildings. But that sidewalk would then lead all the way to the alley between the 6 cluster of smaller buildings and the corner garage. And that alley measures 8 studs wide, and that's even enough for this tow truck. And you can see other things that you expect to find in an alley, a dumpster. We've got some kids on a bike and a board. And we've got more dumpster and someone emptying out trash over there. And of course, throughout you can see various tiled sidewalks all around the fronts of the building, as well as behind the buildings to create that really textured look. Another element that adds variety is vehicles. Of course, in a small city layout, you don't have much space to put vehicles because you rather generally put buildings instead of vehicles, but I've managed to put a variety of vehicles over here on the main road, and I've also got the tow truck in the alley, as well as 2 vehicles in the corner garage, one in the workshop and a police squad car right there. Adding vehicles is a nice touch to any Lego city, but I'll approach them the same way I would custom Lego stickers. They should enhance the city but not overtake. Finally, the last element that adds to a Lego city is the minifigs and the scenes you create with the minifigs. Minifigs and scenes are the heart and soul of any Lego city, and they bring life to your Lego city. I've added some life and bustle to the center of the city with these market stalls. So we have these store vendors and various minifig customers interacting with the vendors. I've also got an interesting little scene here with a homeless guy pushing his cart across the road. In this corner, we have the pizza stand, and there seems to be a kid buying some ice cream. But there seems to be 2 policemen who are eyeing the kid because it looks like he has a packet of sugar in his hand. Luckily, it turns out it's just a packet of salt he's buying for his mum. And throughout the city, I've got different scenes. If you have seen my video on the corner garage, you know that I've actually changed this particular workshop into an illegal chop shop, which is why there's a policeman here wanting to investigate the garage. But we have one minifig here who's being resourceful. He's trying to bribe and distract the policeman with donuts. So if you can create different scenes throughout your city just to make things more interesting and to add life and variety to your different builds, it really makes a big difference for any Lego city. Remember, there are 2 things that make a Lego city great, and that's variety and density. Density is how tightly you can pack the Lego city so that it feels realistic but not overly crowded or cluttered. Personally, I feel Lego City should represent a real world, and in many small cities and towns, there is a high density of people, buildings, and vehicles. It is a tightly packed space, and even though you might not feel it when you're on the ground, if you're to take a bird's eye view, just like this shot over here, you will be able to see how closely knit the various buildings and elements are to each other. And that's what I did for this city layout. I talked about the different buildings, but notice how they are packed to each other. For buildings, the minimum space you want between small buildings is at least 3 studs. That's enough space for minifig to realistically get through and for doors to open. For alleys, I suggest about 8 studs, and for roads for vehicles, for at least one way, they should be 10 to 12 studs. You also want to have sidewalks, and I would generally go with a rule of at least 3 studs for smaller sidewalks and wider for larger sidewalks. But in any city, what you want to have is a bit of variety. So you'll want some smaller alleys, some smaller pedestrian roads, some larger main roads, some small sidewalks, and some larger sidewalks. It is the variety that comes together that adds to the density of the city. So if you're like me, who has grown up in a city and also live in a city and generally visit cities and towns, you'll be very familiar with a setup like this, and this would reflect your real life. However, if you grew up in a place where there's a lot of space and you're not so used to such density, you might find this a bit too cluttered for your liking. So I completely understand that. However, my perspective is, in a Lego city, regardless of the size you have, even if you have an entire basement for your Lego city, it's still a relatively small space and you have to work within a smaller scale. And if you want everything to be minifig scale, as I've done for this small city block, you will need to create an artificial scale to put everything close together. So to me, a realistic density layout fits a majority of Lego cities. Now you might be wondering how I'll approach building a larger city if I had a larger space than this table that you see before me. And you can have a look at my city layouts, such as my Metro City, which is a much larger space. I basically follow the same rules of variety and density, and I would multiply this setup you see here, not in terms of the exact layout, but in terms of the concept and the look of the city. If I had really a lot of space, what I might do is to expand everything proportionately. So instead of having many blocks with 6 small buildings, I might have 4 buildings of 12 steps each, and I would have the gap between buildings slightly bigger. I might make my sidewalks slightly larger and my main roads will be bigger. But I'll still follow the same proportion, density and variety that you see before you. It's just that the proportions or the dimensions will expand a bit to take advantage of the bigger space. But as I've mentioned, I personally relate to such layouts for a city. I think this is representative of a real small city and town. Therefore, my main city layout will still follow these basic design rules. However, I'll take advantage of space and I'll create areas which are not so building intensive as I've done with my brick beach, as well as my highlands and even my underwater setup. So I've made my case, but what do you think? Do you think that this Lego city in terms of variety and density is better than many of the large Lego cities that you have seen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and let me know what you liked or didn't like about this city layout. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.